Manhattan is a borough made up of diverse communities. Communities with different wants and different needs. And that's why it's up to you, the voter, to make that important, educated decision about who will represent your district. Listen to the views from prospective candidates and incumbents, and decide who gets your vote for the race to represent. Your source for multimedia coverage of Manhattan elections. Presented by Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Go to www.mnn.org.
Welcome. The League of Women Voters of the City of New York and the Manhattan Neighborhood Network are pleased to bring you a debate between the candidates running for Manhattan Borough President. The winner in the general election on November 5th will take office in January 2014. I'm Kate Doran, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the City of New York. The candidates are seated in the order of their closing statements, and we'll have several rounds of questions. We'll start with up to 1-minute responses and 30-second rebuttals at my discretion. Let me introduce the candidates. Gail Brewer, the Democrat, on my left, and David Casavas, the Republican, on my right. Welcome. Thank you. The first question will go to Ms. Brewer. If you are elected borough president, Ms. Brewer, what will be your first order of business?
Well, the first order, of course, is what I think people in Manhattan are most concerned about is how do we address the challenge of providing affordable housing. Everywhere I went during the campaign, and certainly for the last 12 years, has taught me that this is a huge issue. You can't do it alone as borough president. You have to involve the mayor, the city council, the other borough presidents, but figuring out what is the way and the path to affordable housing and the prevention of losing affordable housing. That's what the first order of policy business is. Of course, there's always the issue of you want to staff, you want to make sure it's diverse, you want to work on the community boards and make those appointments and make them diverse and responsible for their planning opportunities. But the number one issue is try to figure out how to have a planning staff and work with the city agencies to be able to come up with a pathway to affordable housing in the borough of Manhattan.
Thank you. Mr. Casavas, the same question. What would be your first order of business?
Well, with few duties, I would go to the community boards because that's one of the few places the borough president has any duties or influence at all. They know their neighborhoods, and they should be empowered. I would also move on my one main issue, which would be to eliminate all borough presidencies. These are leftover jobs. They are jobs that go to the old Board of Estimate. This is the old government, the government before the City Council took its rightful place. We were declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1989. Their borough presidencies survived as a fluke. It's a captaincy without a ship. And with no ship, there's no sense to having a captaincy when it is so expensive and so extravagant. And we have very little money going into 2014. Many workers need their jobs, and the city pays many workers who are no longer working. I would like to see them hired back with the monies that go to the borough presidencies at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Ms. Brewer, would you like to rebut those comments?
Sure. I mean, I think the borough presidents are extremely important. I have been in the city council for 12 years. I've been going to the borough board meetings that the current borough president, Scott Stringer, holds. It's a gathering place for the members of the city council, the community boards, and the borough president, and we work together on planning for the entire borough. At the same time, having been in the city council, having worked for the city council, having been around government and the nonprofit sector for 40 years, I know that the need is there. Let me be specific. You have the opportunity to plan for your borough in addition to working with the community boards. And the community boards are, as my opponent indicated, are hugely important. But the borough president has to bring them together. They are not going to be able to be brought together by the mayor because there's often opportunities for differing in a constructive way with the mayor. So the point of the borough president really is the planning that was articulated, and you have to do it in conjunction with the entire borough.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question, Mr. Casavas, will start with you. Ms. Brewer just alluded to it earlier that affordable housing is a serious problem in the entire city and in Manhattan in particular. What ideas do you have to address that serious problem? And do you think you could play a role in improving security and making repairs at NYCHA housing?
Well, let me start by saying the borough president doesn't have a lot more than a bully pulpit. So I would use the bully pulpit to try to influence these issues. But that's all you really can do. The borough president is a costly position. I'd be happy to take the limousine. Gosh, I only take taxis maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So it'd be very nice to be driven around. But in the end, what one has to do is one has to advocate and also not take credit for what other people do. That's a real important point I want to make. The borough president just has to appear on a street corner and take credit for all the people who did the work, whether it's a green market or whether it's housing. People spend a lot of time advocating for better housing. We need more housing. We need more places for people to live, and we need places that people can afford given their paltry salaries. And city workers have paltry salaries, and they're affected too.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Brewer, same question, housing.
Housing. I mean, there are lots of ways that the borough president can play a role. Let me be specific. The borough president has as a mandate to participate in the Uniform Land Use Review procedure, which is basically the zoning rules and regulations. The zoning includes the city council and the mayor, but the borough president can say, this proposal will only go through if there is inclusionary zoning or mandatory inclusionary zoning, or if there's a school in this project. The borough of Manhattan is right now chock full, good and bad, of proposals to be brought to the neighborhoods. And the borough president has a major role in figuring out with the community boards and their wishes how to provide affordable housing and for what band of income, and particularly where there's a city-owned land. There's several projects coming up now where there's projects on city-owned land, and the question would be what kind of affordable housing, number one. Number two, the borough president does have a role in funding. There are funding capital and there's expense funding. And the question is, how do you provide the support for tenants in current buildings so they don't get evicted and they're able to stay in their homes? And number three, the borough president has a role with the community boards to figure out what should be the plan for affordable housing in their neighborhood. So I would actually argue on this particular issue, the borough president has a major role.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on to education. And we'll start this time with Ms. Brewer. Do you support modifying mayoral control of public schools? If yes, what changes would you like to see? And let's also talk about this co-location of charter schools, which is very much in the news right now.
In terms of the borough president, just so our listeners and viewers know, has a role in the sense the borough president makes appointments to the local parent organizations called CECs and to the citywide Board of Education known as PEP. These acronyms are endless, so I try to make them simpler. So they do have a role. The borough president does have a role. In terms of mayoral control, what I would argue is we need municipal control. And what I mean by that is that the citywide board, I call it the Board of Education, now has members appointed by each borough president and by the mayor, a majority by the mayor. That majority, and even the borough president appointments, should go before the city council. Then the city council would have advice and consent, and the city council would have public hearings. The public would know whether this person is qualified and would be able to attend the hearing and speak. So that's what I would call municipal control. In terms of charter schools, I'm the only council member who organized the community to take Harlem's success or West Side's success to court, even Moskowitz schools. We didn't win, but I do think that when a local community says no, the community board, the local parent association, and all the local schools say no to a charter coming into that neighborhood in the public school, it should not be coming in. I think there are good charter schools, and they are wanted in some neighborhoods, but the neighborhood needs to have input.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Casavas, the same question, schools, education.
Okay, as charter schools can be bad as well as good. I know I've seen this before, but in the end, the system is broken. Believe me, I've lived with the system for some time. There are things that can be done to fix the system, and very often they work, and sometimes they don't. It is much better that our children get an education and learn some basics. They should know things like civics, which the League of Women Voters would rather that we learn, or some basic things about the society they live in. I was rather shocked the other day with my college students when only 3 of them knew who David and Goliath were, and I told them, no, they're not married and they're not living in Queens. You know, ultimately, I do have something I wanted to say about real estate. I have a rare master's in real estate analysis, and I do not believe, from my own observation and study, the borough president has the powers that so many say the borough president has.
All right. Thank you very kindly. Let's move from housing and education to trash. Manhattan creates a great deal of garbage that is barged and trucked off the island. Do you support the reopening of the East Side Waste Station? And if not, what ideas do you have? Or even if yes, what ideas do you have for removing garbage from our island? This time we'll start with Mr. Casavas.
I thank you for the question. I particularly thank my opponent for opposing the waste station, or being kind there. I helped to form the one issue party, Dump the Dump, and that is to get rid of the waste station. It is going to be a blight because it is in an area for recreation, and many of our children should not be exposed to this. So those of you in Manhattan are not close to this issue, physically close. If you see Dump the Dump on your ballot, that's why it's there. East Side people are particularly concerned of this. It just doesn't belong there. The neighborhood is really upset. Some alternative can be found, and I would like to work with the mayor, the future mayor, to make sure it's somewhere else. It can't be where it is. It's a question of the health of the children and the viability of a neighborhood which uses that area for recreation. It just can't be done, and people are going to be pretty upset.
Thank you. Ms. Brewer, same question.
As my opponent indicated, I did not vote for it in the City Council. I have taken the pledge, and I do not think that the transfer station at the 91st near the East River is a good idea, and I do not support it at all. But let me be specific about what we do about our trash. Manhattan and the whole city, we only recycle at 22%. That is pathetic. And we need to increase that. Then we wouldn't need marine transfer stations all over the place. The New York City Housing Authority residents don't even have the opportunity to recycle because there are no chutes. I do think that the mayor pushing the notion of getting rid of our petressables or our food waste is a good idea, but it's very late to be doing this. We need to do it in a really focused way. And I think we also need to do better education so the public understands what goes where. In European countries, it is very clear. Either you put it in the right basket in the bin or you get a huge fine. If you go to the street and you look on the baskets, yes, we have some large green and blue containers, and right next door to it is a mesh basket. I don't think the public has a clear understanding as to what goes where. So we need better education. We need to increase the recycling from 22%. We need to make this, if we're going to be sustainable as a borough and as a city, recycling needs to be much higher. The schools now are starting, and I had something to do with this, to recycle the petressables in the kitchen. But every school needs to do it, and every institution needs to do it. So we need a much better education campaign and implementation on recycling.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so here comes something that's closer to our interests as the League of Women Voters. The city just conducted a very expensive runoff primary election for public advocate. Do you support eliminating runoffs entirely, or do you support instant runoff voting for the 3 citywide offices? And this time we'll start with Ms. Brewer.
IRV, which is the acronym for instant runoff voting, I do support it. This particular, in fact, I even have legislation with Councilmember Brad Lander to do that for the public, and I have my own legislation to do IRV, it's a funny acronym, for military and absentees. So I'm very supportive. This recent election cost, I believe, around $13 million. And if you do the math, I believe it's around $69 per voter. So I also think it doesn't give enough voters enough opportunity, because if you had IRV, then you would be able to vote in the primary, and then you would be more participatory because more people vote in the primary than in the runoff. So it's not a complicated process. The scanning machines that we now have and hopefully will use in the future give every voter the opportunity to do that, so it's not complicated for the Board of Elections to implement. I think this is incredibly important. I believe that in the future, all citywide offices will certainly still be, 40% will still be the target. I believe in that, but you need the instant runoff voting.
All right, okay. Mr. Casavas, your views on this?
I concur with my opponent. I do believe that the runoffs are important. Consider that the primary is generally the election, and sometimes 11% of the people vote, which means whoever we get in office in the primary is the eventual victor, which is why I'm running on 4 party lines. I'm running on the Independence Party, the Libertarian, and Dump the Dump. Why? I'm trying to encourage more voter participation. I am not doing this for myself. I'm not doing it to fill my pockets or anything. I'm just doing this to give people a repository for a no vote. If enough people show interest, perhaps we will have a real election and not an election for a few party activists. It is a sure way to damage our city, only when a few people run. Also, I do want to show some sympathy for poor Mr. Thompson, who wanted a runoff, and the Board of Elections wasn't fast enough off the trigger to get him the 40%.
Thank you. Moving to a completely different topic, stop and frisk. The public knows all about that. Do you support it? If yes, explain please, and if not, what changes would you recommend? Mr. Casavas.
I don't like stop and frisk, but I do know that some criminals are detected that way. Might I say that I'm afraid we're going to see another form of stop and frisk in the near future? The city doesn't have enough money, and what the city does when it doesn't have enough money is it tends to ticket people. And it's not always ticketing people from New Jersey who do not make the right turn in New York City. They'll ticket pedestrians. They're going to ticket people who are using cell phones to cross the street. They're going to go to delis and other places like bodegas and use the health department to get more and more income. And why? Because we are in a fiscal crunch. The unions are all negotiating contracts, so we really need money. And also the borough presidencies soak up an awful lot of money. Were they all eliminated, we could probably settle 1 or 2 union contracts. Those people have families and they need money too.
Thank you. Ms. Brewer.
On stop and frisk, I supported and was a sponsor of the 2 bills that passed the City Council, vetoed by the mayor, and then we voted them out of the City Council to become law. One, of course, is to have an Inspector General over the police department, which is done. There's an IG at the CIA, IG at the FBI. And secondly, a bill that would allow somebody to not sue for money, but sue on policy issues if one feels that one is racially profiled. So I support those 2 bills. I think that to answer your question specifically, there should be some stop and frisk, but obviously not to the numbers that we saw recently, although the numbers have gone down. But what I do support, I've had 35 foster care children, a couple of adopted children. I feel very strongly about that group of, I call them 16 to 24-year-olds. They need a lot of support. We need to figure out how to keep them in school with more counseling and support. And we need to find jobs, and we need to find childcare, and we need a lot of support for young people in this city. We don't have it now. And I hope that in addition to that support, we also look at more community policing. Because if the neighborhood feels good about the police department, then they will talk about the bad guys. And you need the eyes and ears of the community in order to catch the bad guys. So one of the reasons not to do stop and frisk is that then you don't get the support of the community with the police. I've seen that myself. When you have support, you catch the bad guys.
Thank you, thank you. All right. The borough presidents appoint all of the members of the community boards. How would you use those recommendations, especially with respect to land use? And as a tangent question, do you support the Midtown zoning change, which would increase the height and bulk of new construction? And we'll start with Ms. Brewer.
In terms of the community boards, you know, as a city council member for 12 years, I have participated in the process. So I have made my own appointments to the borough president and then to the community board itself. So I think the borough president currently has done a good job. There's a panel that looks at the resumes that come in, an environmentalist, somebody who works with the Bar Association, and they look at the recommendations, so it's not just the staff, which is important, or the borough president. I would continue that. The borough president has also put in an urban planning graduate student to help the boards on this massive planning challenge, and I support that. I happen to have passed the open data bill, and the city of New York is, if you really get excited about data, and I know my opponent knows more about it than I do, but I love data, and I love technology, and I'm delighted that the city agencies are putting it onto one portal. But the community needs assistance in deciphering it and working to its advantage. So I would work with somebody, I would make sure that there's data analysis going on in the community boards. That's an aspect that I would add. I would make sure that the appointments are diverse, and certainly a knowledge of planning helps. In terms of East Midtown, I have been testifying in support of the three community boards that are asking that it be slowed down. The Municipal Arts Society has the same agenda. It's now in the lap of Councilmember Dan Garodnick, whose district East Midtown is in, and I'm sure he'll do bring it to our attention what his thoughts are. But it's huge. It's infrastructure, it's air rights, it's landmarks, it's traffic, it's new buildings. Good aspects. I think it's going pretty fast.
Thank you. Mr. Kasavas, same question.
The question is
would you like
would you
to
please
refresh it? Yes. The city council nominates individuals to serve on community boards, but the borough president makes those appointments. We hope after careful review of nominations. So how would you use your power, sir, to make appointments to the community boards?
Okay, well, first, that's right. I wanted to make the correction that my opponent has already made, that half the appointments come out of the borough president, the other half come out of city councilors, many of whom are competent. A lot of those appointments historically have been political. I fully understand that. What I'm more concerned about is the communities and how they develop. There has been a lot of rancor that I have personally witnessed between community boards and borough presidents and plans, because many of the plans don't fit with our communities. You know, there are two values that I studied because I did real estate analysis, and I was very surprised. We thought the values would be more split along age. They actually split along suburbanite versus urbanite. We were asking about people who were over 55, and we found there were two separate values. People in the suburbs valued mobility. People in the cities valued coziness. They liked the coziness of their neighborhoods, whereas people in the suburbs like the idea that they can get in a car, get into a plane, and go to Acapulco or somewhere. Coziness. That's the most important value for our people.
Let me ask you, though, what about the Midtown zoning change? Ms. Brewer addressed that. Do you have any opinions on that?
Midtown is different. Remember, Midtown has these huge buildings. It is a place of business. By the way, Midtown is the dirtiest part of the city. I just love it. It's dirtiest if you count it by rubbish removal, but they spend a lot of time removing the rubbish, so it seems to be a clean area. So there's a lot of upkeep there. If you have to have more density, sometimes Midtown makes sense because people can leave there, go 15 blocks home, and live in the cozy neighborhood they want. Coziness, a coffee shop you've been to for a while, a tree that's been growing for a while. That's the value my people have. And sometimes density can do that in one area, but not in the area they live in.
Okay, thank you kindly. Now we're going to move to transportation and streets. In a recent poll, New Yorkers were asked to name the most dangerous street for pedestrians in each of their boroughs. Manhattan residents responded 6th Avenue. What are your ideas for making 6th Avenue and other crowded streets safer and more efficient? Mr. Casavas.
Well, as I'm an East Sider and my opponent's a West Sider, I shouldn't say 6th Avenue is the worst. It can't be. It's on the West Side. But what I would do is I would time pedestrian gaits. When I say gaits, it's how they walk. And that's really important. Some people walk slower than others. Some cities have a faster gait. We in New York tend to walk faster than other people in other cities. So that's part of it. You've got to time the traffic with the gates, but you also have to time the buses properly. One of the things my people talk about is, gee, you see 3 buses at once. Well, that's because every 5 years or so we space the buses and then the traffic changes. Manhattan's a dynamic place. The more people you have, the density of traffic, the more you have to work on this. And how many cars can you hold? That's another issue. I believe 800,000 is the most cars that we can hold in one day. That's passing through and parking. So what do you do when you're at 1.1 million?
Thank you, thank you. Ms. Brewer.
Well, pedestrian safety is incredibly important. And as a council member, I've worked on it. We sponsored a West Side transportation study in the West 70s, 60s, and we also did one around 94th, 95th Street, which we are continuing. So it is very important. And I do think that the issue of countdown signals has helped because we can see how many more seconds we have to cross. I also think that pedestrians should know that the cars and the car drivers should know that there is a 30-mile limit. I don't think we tell people that often enough. I do think that just generally speed bumps near schools will help. We need to have more of those. There's now a 20-mile-per-hour maximum around schools in the city of New York. So there are, and I actually think that some of the neck downs, as they're called, on streets help. People complain about the fact that there are bike lanes and there are places where plazas and people could sit, but it is slowing down the traffic. You could argue that it's making it more congested, but I think we need to look at that in a different sphere. When should, trucks be doing deliveries? When should we have, certain ways to have better transportation so people leave their private cars at home? But pedestrian safety only takes place if, A, yes, people can cross the traffic carefully and safely, and second, traffic slows down.
Thank you very much. We only have a few minutes left. Let me give you, let's say, 2 of what some like to call lightning round questions. Do you support the expansion of City Bike uptown?
Yes, it's done well so far.
One word.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Ms. Brewer, yes, okay. Do you think New Yorkers should be able to register to vote online?
Yes.
Mr. Casavas?
No, it's a responsibility.
All right. So now it is time to go to our closing statements. And as was determined before the debate, Ms. Brewer will begin.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I want to thank Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And I also want to thank, during the primary, all the Democrats in Manhattan for voting for me. I'm deeply appreciative. I have 40 years of work, either in the private sector or more specifically in the public sector. I've been on my community board. I come out of the women's movement. And I feel very strongly that the neighborhoods are important to our city. And as borough president, I will work to, as I indicated earlier, to plan effectively. Obviously, affordable housing is the #1 issue, but so is job creation, so is making sure our schools are not overcrowded. I'm a believer in transparency, so I will webcast as much as I can. I will put as much information available on the online to the public. But more importantly, I want to work to bring the stakeholders together on bully pulpit issues and issues that I think are important: quality of life, education, housing, and jobs. These are all issues that I care about. I look for your vote on November 5th. Thank you very much.
Mr. Casavas.
First, thank my opponent. I thank my opponent for taking time out from a real job. She works for the City Council, and we're both running for a largely ceremonial job. I also want to say that 2014 is going to be a very difficult year. All the unions' contracts are up, and there's going to be a lot of back pay that is going to be legally demanded, and there's not a lot of cash to pay them. And I really fear that there will be a ticketing blitz, a sort of stop and frisk for anybody to get money from them so that we can pay for people who legitimately are owed this money. I feel the borough presidencies is one way to save by getting rid of them. I also want to say topography. There's only one person in the borough president's office who does topography. About 30 some odd were sent to the city under Ruth Messenger when she was borough president. I would like to take them back, but that would mean eliminating about 30 or so patronage jobs. I think that would save the city money. I'm stopping now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I thank the candidates for participating in today's debate. For more information about voting, candidates, your poll site, and the 6 ballot issues that are going to be on the ballot in November, contact the League of Women Voters at lwvnyc.org, vote411.org, or you can phone us if you like to talk to a human being, 212-725-3541. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., and please come out to vote.